Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Prove Me Wrong podcast. I've got a great show lined up tonight. I'm your host, Pete Lieb. My guest tonight is Doug Reynolds, and we are going to talk about the current American diet, the food pyramid, and what you should be eating for maximized health and weight management. And this is an increased importance right now, as the majority of people in this country and around the world are currently shut indoors and have been for over a month. I'm sure we may have a lot of eating going on strictly out of boredom right now, and you should still be eating the right things. Doug is the founder of Lowcarbusa, which is an organization focused on dietary education and support. They do this by hosting scientific conferences, providing online coaching, and a comprehensive library of scientific papers, supporting the low-carb way of eating, and a worldwide database of low-carb friendly healthcare providers and nutritionists. Doug's mission is to turn the generally accepted food pyramid on its head, and we are going to talk about that today. This topic is personally one that I'm very passionate about because I have also been following a low-carb lifestyle myself for over 2 years, and I fully believe in the benefits. So I look forward to the discussion with an expert in the field. You can find Doug on his website, lowcarbusa.org, and in the upcoming documentary film, Fat Fiction. Be sure to check that out as well. Welcome, Doug, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Pete.
I appreciate that. Can you start me off, Doug, with just kind of telling the audience your story? How did you get where you are now?
So I was a ultra distance athlete, and for many years I trained hundreds of miles a week, and I felt like I was bulletproof. I could eat anything, never put on any weight. I always felt like I was healthy, and I could eat tons of carbs and chocolates and all of that stuff because it was good for me, supposedly, right. Adding to these carbohydrates that I needed to run on. But as I got kind of into my later 40s, I started putting on a little bit of weight each year, and found that no matter how much I ran, I wasn't able to reverse that. And I kind of looked back and I realized that's what was happening, but I didn't even really notice it at the time. And I never stood on the scale because I always thought I was a runner. I didn't need to.
Right.
And one day, I don't even remember why, but I ended up getting on the scale, and I was about 35 pounds over what I used to call my fighting weight. And I was horrified, and was literally a couple of days after that happened that I got an email trying to sell me exogenous ketones, funnily enough. But the subject was ketones, an alternative source of fuel to glucose. And I even know what a ketone was at that stage. I'd never
Right.
even heard of it, which I'm horrified to admit now, but it was the truth. And so I started researching it and sort of buried myself for 3 weeks in all the science, the scientific papers, all the YouTube videos that were out at the time, which wasn't a whole lot back 4 or 5 years ago. But it explained everything. It explained all the problems I was having. It explained even the problems I had when I was in my 30s running these long races, because crushing the carbohydrates for 3 days before the race was the done thing. And
Right.
it just left me standing at the start feeling completely wasted, like I hadn't even started. I had 55 miles to run, and I felt like I could hardly get to the corner. And I thought it was nerves, but now I understand that it was all I did was poison myself for the 3 days with excessive carbohydrates. And so I pulled the trigger and I started doing it. And like really quickly, everything started turning around. My weight started to come down. Inflammation in my knees cleared up. My respiratory issues that I was always battling with cleared up. I started running again, and I started enjoying running again. And within 5 months, the weight all came off, all 35 pounds. No longer sore. I felt literally like I was in my 30s again. I still feel like I'm in my 30s again.
Right.
And yeah, it was groundbreaking for me, that I felt like I needed to try and do something to teach people what I didn't know, back then, which is how we ended up starting Low Carb USA.
And can we start, with the basics for the audience? Can you give them an idea of what, when we talk about low carb diets, ketones, and what are the expectations? How will they start?
Okay, so, a proper ketogenic diet is where the carbohydrate intake is low enough that your body literally, the metabolism shifts, and you stop processing carbohydrates as a source of energy, and you start processing fat. And what the body does in the liver is break down the fat cells and produce ketones. And then those ketones go around, especially for the brain. They are incredibly effective in fueling the brain and the muscles as well. And your muscles also start adapted to oxidizing fat directly. So you're running on oxidized fat and ketones. And your body still makes a tiny little bit of glucose because it needs just the smallest amount. But you literally can live on zero carbohydrates, and your body it's a process called gluconeogenesis, and your body can create enough glucose for its needs in the brain and whatever. And I see you gesturing. So yeah.
So I'm just asking in terms of, you mentioned the brain, and the body does produce some small level of glucose on its own, because the brain does need glucose, right? I mean, there is a specific spot in the brain.
It needs a small amount, but there's a lot of misinformation about your brain runs on glucose. And yes, it does when you eat carbs.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, it runs primarily on ketones. But there are a couple of metabolic pathways that require the tiniest amount of glucose, no matter what, for you to survive. But your body makes more than enough easily for those needs. So there's no worry that, you're not eating enough carbohydrates and your brain's not going to have enough. That doesn't matter. But so just to go back, so the strict ketogenic diet is that one that causes that metabolic shift. And that is really where all the magic happens. And we learn about how it's reversing type 2 diabetes and, addressing all of these chronic diseases. And that really happens when that metabolic shift happens. But there's a lot of people in our community that are not that strict. Paleo, for instance, is up to 30% of the diet is in carbohydrates. And they still end up being really healthy. I think the biggest thing is to try and encourage people to go back to eating real foods. Cut out all the processed foods in your diet, and anything that's in a box or whatever, almost guaranteed is going to have a ton of added sugar in it, for one thing. Plus it's corn and whatever, normally like some kind of thing that's got a bunch of carbohydrates, is made up of carbohydrates itself. And it's just a perfect storm. And that's what's made our nation so sick.
And it seems like the vast majority of our existence, we didn't have the health issues that we're developing now. Like you mentioned, the obesity, the diabetes, cancer, things like that. In your opinion, is it a direct cause with the government intervention with the food pyramid? Is that a direct cause and effect, or is it just a coincidence?
My opinion is that it is totally the cause.
Okay.
But it is still epidemiological, right? It is associational. So you can look at the McGovern Commission introduced the food pyramid and the dietary guidelines in 1977, and you see this exponential rise in obesity, diabetes, and all these other chronic diseases. Did something else happen at the same time that caused that really did cause that. We don't have clinical trials that prove that this is exactly what happened. But on the other side, if you look at all the trials now, Verta Health is a perfect example where they're trying to treat diabetes with this. And when they go back to the olden days diet, right, the way we used to eat when your grandmother used to make dinner, right, and they pretty much go back to that, and people's diabetes go into remission. They reverse their diabetes. Their A1C comes down into the fives again, and they are unbelievably healthy. No more diabetes. And so for me, that in reverse kind of proves that what we're saying about this causing this exponential rise was actually the cause. And
we've talked previously, and you mentioned that Low Carb USA is doing some work to try and amend some of the guidelines around the what's considered a healthy diet. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so I'm involved in a what's it called, like an activist group called ALCAN, which is a Low Carb Action Network, which is working particularly to try and have changes made to the USDA dietary guidelines. But I mean, we were really involved in the current round of because they're coming out later this year with the next revision for the next 5 years. And we had tons of people going there and making these submissions, and we really thought we were making an impression,
Right.
But by all accounts, not only is it looking like it's going to stay the same, but they're even talking about lowering the cap, maybe even to zero, of the allowable saturated fat in the diet. So it's going to be even worse for the next 5 years than it is right now. And so what we decided is that we can't wait for another 50 years. How long is it going to take before these guidelines get changed? We can't wait for that in order to change what's happening in medicine. We can't wait to start teaching the doctors to consider this as a therapeutic intervention. And, we have a very small group of doctors right now who are on board with this. And our idea is to try and that's the conferences and stuff that we put on. We really try and encourage doctors to come so that we can teach them about this. And so what we did was from 2018 in July, we started working on it. And in May last year, we were able to publish a set of clinical guidelines for use by physicians in a clinical setting. So somebody comes in morbidly obese, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, obviously type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And they present with that. And here is a guideline if you want to consider this as a therapeutic option to try. And it's like the most visited page on our website now, and we're really proud of that. And it's more and more doctors are getting to see this. And the ones that were on the fence before, where they maybe believed it, but they didn't have the courage to take it to their patients because it wasn't standard of care, now feel like there's a community supporting them in advocating this. So, and there's people like Professor Tim Noakes in South Africa and Gary Fetke in Australia and a few others that the names escape me right now, who have been attacked and sanctioned by their organizations, and they fought it in court and won. And every time one of those things happens, that just adds more power to our community, because now there's precedent. Now the Diabetes Association is very hesitant to go and try and charge somebody because there's legal precedent now that where guys have spent years in court and eventually persevering, or succeeding.
So if you go to the grocery store and you just close your eyes and pull a box, if you look at that box will say fat-free, heart healthy. And so the misinformation or that level of information is what has been beaten into the general public for ever since basically I've been alive.
Right. Yeah.
How did that war on fat begin? And can you give us some background into when did fat become a bad thing?
Well, people should go and look up Belinda Fettke, who's Dr. Gary Fettke's wife. And she's done some incredible research into real origins of it. And it dates way back into the beginning of the 19th century, or beginning of the 20th century, early 1900s. And, it has roots in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and their teachings. But really where it really started to take hold was Ansel Keys in the 1950s or something published a graph, and he took 22 countries and he plotted the number of heart attacks against the amount of carbohydrates eaten, right? But it was like a scatter plot. So what he did was he took 6 of them that formed this like nice curve upwards. What's it called?
Just an upwards trajectory.
Yeah. There's a word for it, but I forget it right now. But those 6 nations fitted his curve perfectly, showing that the more carbohydrates you eat, the more heart attacks you have. And he basically squashed the other, other 16 data sets and just left them off.
Well, did he say carbohydrates, or did he say...
Which is scientific. It's scientific fraud. Not plain and simple.
Did he say carbohydrates, or did he say fats? He was talking fat, right? He was talking.
You're right.
I just want to make sure that.
Yes.
Right.
Correct. So he was talking saturated fat. Right. Saturated fat causes heart disease. The carbohydrate thing came in as a replacement for the energy. So yes, sorry,
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
So yeah, glad you pointed that out. Right. So then what happened was that the McGovern he put pressure on people, and John Yudkin had the opposite opinion. He said that it was sugar that was causing heart attacks, and there was really good science to back that up. But Ansel Keys was a bully, and he basically crushed John Yudkin and anybody else who tried to contradict him. And he put more and more pressure on, and eventually, I think it was because of the president having a heart attack, that they all were up in arms and thinking, oh my God, how is it that everybody's suddenly having heart attacks? And so they convened the McGovern Commission to try and work this out. And Ansel Keys and his research had a lot of input into this thing. There were people that would voice an opposite opinion, and a lot of them were saying there is no science to prove what you're saying. And Senator McGovern said, well, we can't wait until we have the science because like our president's dying of a heart attack, we have to fix it.
Right.
And so they just implemented this philosophy. And that was to basically reduce or remove the saturated fat from the diet, all fat from the diet. And that's where I was saying that's where carbohydrates came in, because in order to replace that energy source, there had to be something.
Right.
And so carbohydrates was the thing. And so now suddenly the recommendations by the government to everybody was to eat a high carbohydrate, low fat diet. And that just took off. So within 2 years, it was adopted pretty much worldwide, at least by all the English speaking countries in the world. And it's been with us ever since. And it's with these catastrophic results, and yet no one's looking at it and saying, hey, sheesh, we made a mistake. We need to fix this. And that's what we're trying to fix now.
And you had mentioned sugar previously. And to your point, there was a ton of evidence regarding the negative effects of sugar. And also just a lot of really astounding statistics in terms of the average U.S. citizen. 100 years ago, they consumed 5 pounds of sugar a year. Today, it's 150 pounds of sugar a year. and also the effects to the immune system from a large sugar intake. Something like as little as one can of Coke can drop your immune system 50% for about 4 hours. So, I mean, that is something that people don't even think about. Some people don't even drink water. I mean, from the moment they wake up in the day, they're drinking some type of sugared, carbonated beverage. And that's all they drink all day long. And they also don't think about the calories that introduces as well. I've seen people drink 2 liters of Coke a day. They drink a 2 liter a day. And that's really enough calories. You don't need to eat anything else besides the fact that then you're putting that sugar in your body and your immune system is weakened and you're getting sick. But the sugar people have a much bigger lobbying force. They have a lot more money. Sugar is much more palatable than fat. Fat's easy to say, oh, nobody wants that. Also there's been a link between sugar and carbohydrates and cancer, and you might have mentioned that as well. And that's really what set it off for me, Doug, was when I was going through the same journey myself. And I told you I've been doing this for about 2 years. When I started, I was 6'3", 220 pounds. And when you're 6'3", 220, you can kind of hide it. It doesn't look that bad. But I felt sluggish. Like you, I was starting to feel old. I wasn't moving the way I used to move. And I did the research like you did. I made the same choices. And what flipped the switch for me was when I saw what a PET scan was, and when they're looking for cancer, and essentially they are just injecting you with radioactive sugar, and wherever that sugar goes, that's where the cancer is. That it's feeding on that sugar. They're feeding it. And then I'm thinking to myself, how many young people are, with leukemia or some type of cancer like that, and the mother, I've heard it a lot of time. The mother's like, all I could get them to eat were M&Ms. That's all I could get my child to eat. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's because that's what the cancer needs. That's what the cancer wants. So I don't think anybody's really thought about the negative effects of sugar, or they're just blind to it. But what are some of the other physical benefits of the high-fat, low-carb diet? I know you'd mentioned diabetes. What about things like heart disease? I'm going to start throwing all of the old wives' tales at you and let you kind of knock them out of the park for me. So I'm at a higher risk of heart disease if I eat high fat, right?
Absolutely not. And so what's becoming more, and if you look at all the real research that's going on now, what's really seeming to be the issue as far as cardiovascular disease goes is inflammation of the artery walls. And it's almost like the LDL or the cholesterol is a Band-Aid. Mm-hmm. It's not the cause of it. And what it does is it's going in there and it's protecting you from the inflammation in these arteries. And the inflammation is caused, one, by very high glucose in the bloodstream, which causes very high insulin all the time. And it's probably really the high insulin that's causing causing the inflammation. And also a lot of polyunsaturated oils as well. There's a lot of research into that as well. And trans fats and all that kind of stuff, we're starting to become aware that they're bad. But the main reason they're bad is because they cause a lot of inflammation in the body, not just in the arteries, but in your joints and in everything. But as far as cardiovascular disease, what's important is in the arteries. And so, there's so many guys like Ivor Cummins and Dave Feltman that are doing incredible research in this field now, and showing that for most or a lot of people, when they go on a low carb diet, their blood lipids come down, their LDL comes down, their HDL goes up. Always the triglycerides go way down. But you do have a small subsection of people where the LDL goes up. It sometimes stays up and sometimes it goes up for a while when you first go on the diet. But what they're showing is that doesn't matter. In the absence of the other inflammatory markers and no inflammation in your arteries, those LDL things are just high lipoproteins anyway. They boats carrying the cholesterol around in the bloodstream, and you need cholesterol, every single cell in our bodies has cholesterol in it. It's fundamental to our existence. And lowering it actually, and there's research out there on that as well, that by lowering it, it has all sorts of other side effects that are really bad. And that as long as there's no inflammation for the cholesterol to actually come and start trying to act as a Band-Aid, they run up and down through your arteries, no problem, don't stick to anything. And so the real science now is showing that at least in the absence of carbohydrates, because if someone's like smashing carbohydrates all day long, all bets are off. I'm not prepared to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on a ketogenic diet or a very low carb diet and your cholesterol's up a little bit or whatever, it's not something that should be concerned about. I would say check with a cardiologist, but make sure it's a cardiologist that, because I can't give medical advice, right? I can just tell you what I see.
Sure, yeah.
But if you're going to go and that goes to with anybody that wants to try this. If you want to do this, especially if you're on medications, because you're going to find that you're going to get off your medications really quickly. Hypertension, diabetes meds, insulin, metformin, all these things. If you're going to do this, you need to get off those probably really quickly. And it's really good to get a doctor that knows about this, that knows what they're doing to help you deprescribe and get off those medications. And if you're worried about your cholesterol and that, then find a cardiologist that is low carb friendly, that understands this, that can then advise you and allay your fears or whatever. And it's become more prominent now with this current COVID crisis, mm-hmm. is that more and more of the doctors are doing a lot of their stuff online.
Right.
And so even if you don't have a keto-friendly cardiologist in your town, you can find someone like Brett Scher or Christian Assad and numerous other ones who will do a consultation with you online, and then you can talk with them and get advice from them about that.
How do women fare on a low carb low carb diet? And I only say that because I know I've had some doctors who've also mentioned that it may be tougher on women just with regards to body fat percentages that women need versus men, and it might be harder on the gallbladder.
I haven't heard anything. Body fat percentages. Most of the anecdotes that I hear, most of them, where it's a couple that's doing it, the woman's always saying they're all pissed off because the husband just loses weight so much quicker.
Right.
So a lot of them do tend to take a bit longer. But it also depends on where they are in their life, because if they what's it called? Change of life. What's it
menopause?
Called?
Premenopause.
Menopause, right. So if they pre-menopause or going through menopause or post-menopause, mm-hmm. there's all sorts of other hormones going on, rushing around in their system that play havoc with this. But almost always it's solvable. You just need to find, there's people that specialize in that. And if you're one of those people that's trying this and you're doing exactly the same as your husband and he's brilliantly healthy now and you're still struggling, then you maybe need to find someone maybe help you tweak the things until you get it right. But one thing I would say about that is everyone kind of focuses on weight. And for us, normalizing weight is almost like a side effect of being healthy. Mm-hmm. And our main focus is to get people metabolically healthy. And if you're metabolically healthy, your weight will eventually come right. Some will take longer than others, which can be frustrating, I understand. But the weight in itself is not the problem. It's the underlying metabolic concerns that resulted in you putting on that weight that are the things that are making you really sick and that are going to kill you. And we talked a little bit about COVID. Maybe if you're okay, we could maybe talk about that quickly.
Sure.
But I mean, what's becoming so obvious now is that almost without fail, the people that are dying and getting really sick are the ones who have some comorbidity. And the comorbidity or some other diseases are all these metabolic diseases that are reversed, halted, reversed, or completely eradicated by changing our diet. As far as I'm concerned, everybody that's concerned about getting COVID should be changing the way they eat right now to give themselves a better chance of not developing these complications if they do, in fact, contract the thing.
What is a typical day, just using you as an example? I know that there are a spectrum of how people live the lifestyle. What are some of the typical day look like for you at mealtime?
So I don't want to scare people off here because intermittent fasting is something that often comes up, and often people lead with that. And I feel like that does the community a bit of a disservice because it makes people really, who are currently eating 6 meals a day, 3 meals and 3 snacks or whatever.
Right.
To tell them that they possibly on some days only going to eat once a day is going to freak them out. But what you do find is the minute you get off the carbohydrates and you're not reliant on them anymore, the hunger cravings go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so we typically eat twice a day at most, and very often just once. If I stop at 2:00 and go and get something to eat from the fridge, it's normally because my brain needs a break, because I've been working since 4:30 in the morning.
Right.
Not because I'm hungry. And then there are times when I'm busy through that period and I work right through and I look up and it's 6:00 and think, wow, okay, I should probably eat something. I shouldn't eat something because I'm starving now. I should eat something because probably we should eat something. I'm not into multi-day fasts and that like some people are. And okay, if you have certain issues or conditions, it might be something worth looking at down the road. But at least a 24-hour intermittent fast is not uncommon, but it's never deliberate. I don't deliberately think, okay, today I'm not going to eat for the whole day.
And I also don't want to scare anybody off, but I would like to at least mention the fact that I don't think most people really understand how much they eat in a day. And again, that's another byproduct of what has been pushed on us as an American portion. And if you go to a restaurant and the plate is enormous and the amount of food is enormous, that's looked at as a great thing. You go to a pasta restaurant and they'll put this enormous plate of pasta in front of you and you think, this is awesome. I'm getting my money's worth. And you feel like you have to eat every drop of it. People don't realize just how much they actually eat and how much they really need to eat. There's a difference between the two. And I know when I started, and I'm kind of bringing this out for everybody else, I used a couple of apps. I used apps on my phone, which helped me track how much I ate and when I ate. And like you, initially I went with the intermittent fast as well, but I did a smaller fast every day. So it was like a 16-hour fast. I would finish at 6 o'clock at night. I would finish my meal and I would come back in and eat again at 10 o'clock the next day. So basically I just skipped breakfast. But then from 10 o'clock, I would eat from 10 to 6. I call that my feeding window. Mm-hmm. And I tracked how much I ate. And I would recommend that to anybody who's starting, is to track how much you eat. Because it'll be an eye opener for you. You'll see really quickly, wow, this handful of almonds was actually X amount of calories, and you wouldn't even expect it. You would eat the whole bag versus a handful. So I think those are great things to start with. And again, there are a ton of apps out there. This is something that's really catching on, the low carb lifestyle. There's a lot of apps that have been made to help you track what you're eating. But I would start there.
I totally agree. And I mean, I only started putting stuff into a tracker after about 3 months because we were getting frustrated. It hit like a bit of a plateau.
Right.
And so I suddenly thought, okay, let's try and understand. I was trying to understand why. And I was horrified when I started putting this stuff into the tracker.
Absolutely.
And so I agree with you. You know, some people, I've stopped doing it now because I pretty much know exactly what I'm eating. I don't need to do that. Although I'll go and put something in every now and then. If I go out and I eat something that I don't normally eat and I don't really know what's in it, I'll go and just put it in the tracker to see what it is, so I know for the future. But some people maybe just do it for a few days, but just so that you become aware of what the makeup is of the food that you're eating and how much it is before you realize, like you say, I mean, coming to this, like macadamia nuts, we were eating because macadamia nuts are good for keto, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but we were pounding them. And then I kind of work out, okay, well, like just a little handful like this is 2 ounces is a hell of a lot of food.
Yeah.
And so then we would, just taking a little handful instead, and suddenly things started to get back on track again.
It really helps you understand what a serving size actually is.
Exactly.
Versus what an Americans think a serving size is.
And I think that's the problem, is that you're so used to seeing this huge plate of food.
Right.
Now you're eating this nutrient dense food. So it's, even for the same amount of calories, it's a much smaller plate. And so your eyes are telling you that you've just had the starter here, like where's the rest of the food? And it takes a while to reprogram your brain into acknowledging, accepting that this is actually all you need. And it is actually sometimes even more than you were eating before, but in a much smaller package, right?
Right. What about the keto flu? I know a lot of people don't want to start, or they stop very quickly after starting because they start to feel sick. What do you recommend with regards to that? And what is that?
Well, so the idea is that, well, what I heard it initially explained to me was, like, you have this glycogen storage, which is like carbohydrate, sugar basically stored in your muscles and in your liver. That is your store, right? And what happens is that if you stop eating carbohydrates, it starts tapping into that store. And it's only when that store gets down to basically zero, and now your body's thinking, oh, shiza, now what do I do? And then it starts, oh yeah, I've got these ketone things I can make. And it starts, that's when the metabolism starts shifting.
Right.
But then it takes a few days so it takes 4 or 5 days for it to get to that point. And it can probably take another 5 to 7 days for your system to kick in properly and be now running on fat and ketones. And that's a pretty good explanation, and I think it has validity to a certain point. But I think one of the things that I learned further down the road that I always tell people about if they're just starting out is the fact that the minute you stop eating carbohydrates, in the first couple of days you'll lose like 5 pounds, and everyone's excited about that. And I have to burst their bubble and say that's actually mainly water, right? Because as those carbohydrates, in order to store the carbohydrates, it's using a bunch of water to store that as well. And in order to jettison that water, and once it's released, your body actually excretes salt or sodium, and the water follows it. That's how apparently that's how it makes you pee.
Right.
And so if you you're losing a bunch of salt, and that you're not used to losing, and so the levels in your bloodstream actually get low, way low. And in fact, when I first started doing it, and I didn't know about any of this stuff, I got really low blood pressure. I was hyperglycemic all the time, and I literally, if I was sitting at my desk, if I stood up to go walk somewhere, I would have to rest on the desk for a little bit to stop spinning until I went. And I just thought this was the keto flu, but this was going on for weeks into the thing, and I was still having it. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just one of those guys. I've got a long conversion, right? And then I read about the salt thing, and that you need to be eating a lot more salt now, now that you're on this diet.
Right.
And I went into the kitchen. I put a half teaspoon of salt in the palm of my hand, and I threw it in my mouth, and I chased it down with a bit of water. And from about 15 minutes after that until now, I've never had a problem again. It's literally that fast. It fixed it like that. And so to go back to the keto flu, my feeling is there has to be this dip, I think, in terms of going through this conversion. But I don't think it needs to be nearly as severe if you make sure that right from the beginning you start eating more salt.
Okay.
And, Steve Finney talks about 5 grams of sodium a day, which then translates to about 10 grams of sodium chloride, right, which is table salt. And so, when you're talking about supplements and that, then they're talking about 100 milligrams of sodium, and that's like a big supplement. We're talking 10 grams of salt, and there's a huge difference. Now, I need to say this though.
Sure.
For the people that have hypertension, that have high blood pressure, and they're on meds and all of that kind of stuff, I'm not a doctor, and you need to work with a keto-friendly doctor in order when you're doing this, but almost guaranteed you're going to come off that medication like really quickly, and will in fact even possibly end up having to subsidize your meals with more salt in order to keep your blood pressure at normal levels. So again, like diabetes in that, completely reversed. Thousands and thousands of cases of this. So it is something to consider if that's another one of these metabolic conditions that is very effectively treated by adopting this lifestyle.
And so I know you touched on it a little bit earlier, but in terms of athletic performance, you don't feel like it has affected your athletic performance long term at all? You feel just as effective now as you were when you were pounding pasta?
Yeah, I really do. There's so much research out there, but if you have to look at the research, there's a few guys. Trokalasian does a lot of stuff as well, where he's looking at people that are coming out with papers in the last few years, because what was happening was that people were comparing a low carb diet with a regular diet, but the low carb diet, they were on the diet for a week.
Yeah. Before
they started, so they were right at the bottom of the conversion curve, and then they were comparing them to people that had been continuing to eat the regular diet and saying, "Oh, look, the low carb diet is inferior." And so more and more of these things are looking at people that are properly adapted, that have been adapted for years, and now you compare those people's performance to people that are on the regular diet, and suddenly it's a whole different ballgame, and especially for endurance sports, it's one of those things where you don't need to keep topping up anymore. I know of guys that run ultra marathons now on just water. They don't take anything, and they just fueled completely on the ketones in their blood that they and your body just continues to make them. And and
especially
and
once,
now even sorry,
I'm just saying, especially once you get too far into it, your body doesn't really tolerate carbs and sugar very well anymore. I mean, I know now. I don't crave it any longer, but I've had a piece of cake once a year when my kids have a birthday, and I'm sick. I'm probably sick for 4 or 5 hours afterwards. So your body no longer tolerates sugar and carbs the way it used to. I mean, it really kind of says
Exactly.
it just purges it from your system and says, good riddance, and it doesn't want it to come back.
Yeah. But that back when I first started getting involved with this lifestyle, that was already kind of becoming known that for endurance athletes, this was a big thing. But I'm seeing more and more now about high intensity as well, and that there are guys that are functioning as well, if not better, on keto in the high intensity space. I keep forgetting his name. It's a guy that runs Keto Gains, Luis Villesano, and he is this. You don't get buffer than that.
Yeah.
And he runs this massive. He's got this massive following of high intensity guys that are doing it on keto. And even better than that is we've recently become involved with a guy called Dr. Ben Bokikio. And he's been doing this for like 50 years, but recently he's starting to get notoriety because of the keto has become a big thing these days. But he's talking about doing a particular format of this exercise that results in activation of the same metabolic pathways that are activated by the ketogenic diet. So to combine that with the diet is massively powerful. And it literally we talk about doing one exercise per main muscle group for a period of so you choose the weight for between 30, so you fail completely between 30 and 90 seconds. Doesn't matter how many reps, as long as you muscle under load between 30 and 90 seconds and you work until complete failure. And then you literally put that down and you go on to the next exercise. You can do the whole workout in 15 minutes. And in order to have an amount of recovery, you can only do it twice. So 15 minutes twice a week.
Okay.
And I started doing that. I was trying to do gym for years before that because as I was getting old, I felt myself getting really weak and very worried about that.
Yeah.
I started doing this with him coaching me to just show me exactly what it meant to fail properly. I think because that's what a lot of people don't really get.
Right.
But literally at the age of 54, I think I was 53, 54, I put on 5 pounds of muscle mass and lost another pound of fat in 3 months. So if you work it out, 3 months, that's 12 weeks. That's 24 workouts of 15 minutes.
5 pounds of muscle.
And I'm stronger now than I have ever been in my life. So, to say that you can't function like that. And I'm at the point now where I'm eating less and less vegetables. I'm not a carnivore, but I'm very close.
There. Yeah.
And Pam makes an amazing shrimp dish, a bunch of broccoli and stuff in and like that. So I'll eat that. And I'm finding it hard to give up avocados.
I love avocado.
But outside of those, I'm barely eating anything unless we go out somewhere or whatever. And you don't want to be rude for the folks,
So we have about 10 minutes left. Let me spend that 10 minutes kind of talking about what are some of the avenues of support that Low Carb USA can provide to somebody who wants to start today.
So there's a bunch of resources. Let's start with that, right?
Sure.
So there's conferences that we put on, which obviously are a bit on hold at the moment, but we'll probably still be doing it online if we are not unable to have our next one in August. The amazing way to meet up with other people like-minded, especially if you're a physician or a doctor or a medical practitioner of some kind, then you get to learn about all of this stuff. But there's regular people from the public that attend as well because they want to learn about this too, and they want to come and spend time over that weekend with people that get it too, so that they're not being criticized and ostracized by their family and their friends and their doctors and whatever. They're in a safe place. So those are amazing. We've got tons of videos. I've done a series with Dr. Robert Sivas of I think it's 13 videos, I think, that are all started out to be less than 20 minutes each and all over an hour and a half. A lot of time, but you guys are all stuck at home now, so this may be a good time to listen to it. But absolutely phenomenal information in those lectures and talks with him. We have all the videos behind a paywall for our for all the conferences that we do. We have a list of papers and articles where if people want to dig into the science a lot more, then there's like a one-stop shop there where they can go and find all the relevant papers and articles that might talk about the particular thing that they're trying to investigate.
Okay.
We have a database of keto-friendly doctors and dietitians, so people can type in their zip code or their city if they're in a different country, and try and find someone that's going to be open to this conversation near them that can help them. And I think most importantly is the clinical guidelines that are there. Anybody can go and read them. If you're a doctor, then hopefully you take it on board and you start taking this to your patients. If you're not, then print it out. And it's now in 5 different languages. I was literally talking to a guy today about getting it. It's in 6 languages. This would be translated into Italian. So that would be a 7th language. And there's another guy talking about Dutch. So that would be an 8th language. Go and print this thing out and take it to your doctor and say, this is becoming standard of care we're not saying the other one's wrong, just that if you don't eat carbs, then your metabolism's different.
Right.
And because it's different things apply. And that standard of care does not apply to us. This one does. And as more and more doctors acknowledge that this is the right thing to do in all situations, that consensus effectively becomes standard of care, because the document itself is just a guidelines document. Standard of care is an agreement by all the doctors that it is a standard.
So my last question then is also, you were involved in a documentary called Fat Fiction, and I believe that's it's online now, right? On Hulu or Amazon Prime, isn't that?
It's on Amazon. It was available on Amazon, and I think I read today or yesterday that it's just gone to Prime.
Okay.
So it's available on Amazon Prime now. It's also available on FanForce TV, which is a thing which originally what it was that people could then apply to have a showing in a theater near them and try and get their mates and that to come and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But that happened like just as this whole COVID thing hit. And so that kind of put a pin in that one. But what they've converted to now is where people can have watch parties. So they can arrange a live online screening, invite all their friends. And then what some of them have done, have reached out to some of us who were in the movie and asked us to be available at the end of it for a Q&A session. And I was just involved in one, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. And we ended up sitting there chatting for like 2 hours afterwards. It was amazing. An amazing amount of information that people learned from just sitting in that Q&A. It was pretty awesome. So if they look up FanForce TV, because FanForce is going to take them to the cinema showings. Mm-hmm. FanForce TV will take them to the opportunity to set up a watch party type thing if that's something that they want to do. If they feel they've got enough friends who could help screen it.
Awesome. Well, I mean, again, thanks so much, Doug, for joining the show. Again, Mr. Doug Reynolds. He is the founder of Low Carb USA. You can find that at lowcarbusa.org. We just talked about the movie, Fat Fiction. It's now on Amazon, well, at least we think, Amazon Prime. It is on Amazon Prime now, yes. We're offering some watch parties where Doug may be available for a Q&A afterwards. That's fantastic. Is there anything else other than what we've talked about already that you'd like to spend a moment to plug? I know personal appearances and things like that are kind of squashed right now, but anything else?
I don't know. Maybe just keep your eye out and start following us and keep.
Sure.
Whenever we're trying to do new projects and stuff, we often reach out to the community and say like, hey, anybody able to help us with this or help us with that or whatever. And okay, if you want to become a part of this community and can contribute, then there's ways to do that. We're actually literally right now working on establishing a nonprofit association, Society Metabolic Health Practitioners, like the ADA kind of thing for low carb doctors and dietitians and health coaches. And we'll probably migrate the provider database over there and the guidelines so that it's all under that umbrella. But the whole idea is then to provide a support community that accepts everybody from all walks of life, as long as we're talking carbohydrate restriction and increase in saturated fat, then you're in the right place, and exactly what that diet looks like. If you're a keto vegan or you're a carnivore or you're somewhere in between, paleo, doesn't matter. You get it.
Right.
And exactly your particular menu may differ from someone else's, but you get the fundamentals. And so I'm pretty sure that as this thing, come and join the thing and respond to any requests for us to share it or volunteer to do something for us. Maybe we're looking for an accountant to help us set up the QuickBooks or something. There's always something that people can do so that they can feel like they're a part of it.
Right. And it is good to be with like-minded individuals. To your point,
totally,
it's so much better to be with individuals who support what you're doing versus look at you like you're weird or try to bring up all the reasons that what you're doing is wrong. So,
correct.
So thanks again, Doug. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining the podcast. Hopefully we can talk to you again down the road.
I hope we can, yes.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
So once again, that was Doug Reynolds. Doug Reynolds is the founder of Low Carb USA. And again, I brought him on because I am very passionate about this subject. I think actually the first podcast that the Prove Me Wrong podcast ever did was a podcast on the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting. I also intermittent fast. I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. Doug mentioned it a little bit, but he didn't want to scare you away from at least starting. To me, it's as simple as saying skip breakfast. I mean, literally, skip breakfast. Don't put cream in your coffee. Take black coffee if you want to drink some caffeine in the morning. We all have that addiction, myself included. But skip breakfast. Eat your lunch, start at lunch, and then eat lunch and dinner. And track what you're eating. And for me, it was as simple as, when I started, it was as simple as no rice, no pasta, no bread, no sugar, basically anything white. I kind of cut white foods out of my diet completely. And just like Doug, within 2 or 3 months, I had gone from 220 pounds to about 185 pounds. And I just stayed there. I didn't work out anymore. I didn't increase my activity levels any more than I had previously. It was just kind of where my body decided to drop, that hit that homeostasis point, and it just said, okay, this is kind of a good weight for you. This is where you should be. And just like Doug, the inflammation in my joints was gone. My mental acuity was back. I felt sharper than I had before. I slept a whole lot better. I didn't really have, diabetes or high blood pressure or things like that, but my cholesterol level did come down. It came down from what it was previously. So, you really don't have anything against trying it. And I think a lot of times the things that you've heard that would make it bad are misinformation. It's just not true. If I was a woman, that's kind of why I brought it up earlier. If I was a woman, I would work with your physician a little bit more and make sure that what you're doing is going to fit and suit your body. And that is what makes Low Carb USA so helpful as well, is because they do give you that list of healthcare professionals who will listen to what you're trying to do. Some of them don't. Some of them are more interested in just keeping you on the pill. They give you the pill, they give you, whatever medication they're pushing that particular day, and that's it. And they don't look beyond that. They don't look at things that you can do holistically to save your own life. Also, The Fat Fiction was the movie that Doug is in involved in. There's also a couple more that I had seen personally one called The Magic Pill. It's on Netflix. It should still be on Netflix. It was a great movie around the ketogenic lifestyle. I would definitely recommend that. It'll really kind of it has some real life examples of people who were living with certain ailments, or, there was a child with autism, and it kind of showed what removing carbohydrates did with her cognitive abilities and kind of the way she interacts with people, individuals with cancer, individuals with diabetes. It really ran the gamut, and it kind of followed these individuals for 3 or 4 months and showed you what happened to them through eating high fat, low carb. Really interesting movie. There was also a movie called The Science of Fasting, and that goes more towards the intermittent fasting. And again, I would recommend that as well. And I would recommend starting slow. It's going to be hard not to eat because your body is conditioned to eat. And your brain is conditioned to think, I should eat. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I need to eat right now. Not really. You don't. But your brain thinks so and your body thinks so. So maybe you want to start with 12 hours or 14 hours initially. If you finish eating dinner at 6, don't eat again until maybe 8 the next morning. That's harder than you think. Trust me, most people go to bed and they're eating a snack on the way to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and then they're eating again at 6 o'clock in the morning. You never give your stomach a chance to digest what's inside. Your stomach takes roughly 8 hours to digest your food. If you are eating every 6 hours, you never complete your digestion process. So then what happens? You put something new in, it just pushes the other stuff to the side and tries to work on the new stuff that's come in. That's what ends up becoming fat along the spare tire area that every man in the world knows what I'm talking about. So you need to give yourself a chance for your stomach to actually digest what you've taken in. And, the longer you stretch that out, it really is better for you. And I would recommend, once you get to the point where it's become easy for you, I would recommend doing a 24-hour fast once a month, once every other week, something like that. I know individuals who do a 3-day fast once a month. They start every month with a 3-day fast, 72 hours. It's not as difficult as you think. What that does is it allows your body to completely clean out what's in your stomach, completely finish the digestion process. Then it cleans out your liver, and then your body goes looking. It goes looking for dead, diseased, malfunctioning cells in your body, and it starts eating them too. Starts eating those things and starts repairing itself. That's actually called autophagy. So your body goes out and starts finding dead, dying cells, malfunctioning cells, broken cells, whatever it may be. It eats them and replaces them. You're actually getting younger. Think of it that way. Your body is recreating itself. So eventually you want to get a little bit longer than that. You want to get up to, 16, 18 hours if you can. Again, like I said, what I do, I'll finish eating at 6 and I'll start eating the next day at noon. And that's just kind of how I live. If I'm hungry, I eat in that time frame. But that's kind of where I keep it. So again, I was really happy to have Doug on. I think the information he brings and the resources he brings are incredibly valuable. Lowcarbusa.org. I would recommend that you all look it up. What are your comments? Have any of you out there tried the keto process or the low carb diets? Were you successful? Were you not successful? And why? If you want to drop us a line, you can contact us through our Gmail account. It's provemerongcast@gmail.com. You can tell us what it was that you found difficult about the transition, or did you find it easy? And here are some strategies that you used. I would also recommend, again, using those apps and really checking what it is you put in your mouth every day. If you want to contact us on Facebook or Instagram, you can also drop us a line there. Just search Prove Me Wrong. That's the name of the program. If you're looking for more ways to hear the podcast, we are on Spotify, Stitcher, Tunein Radio, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. Really, any app that you use to find podcasts, you can find the Prove Me Wrong podcast. Then like and subscribe to the show, and you will be notified when the next episode is released. We typically release an episode once a week. We're also on YouTube, as you can see here, like the Prove Me Wrong YouTube page. Like and subscribe to the YouTube page. Once again, you will be notified when a new episode is published. And so before we go, the Prove Me Wrong podcast today is brought to you by Java Remix. Java Remix is the perfect blend of 100% organic Arabica coffee infused with nano-emulsified CBD. Start your day off on the right foot with a great tasting cup of coffee with all the demonstrated benefits of CBD. Java Remix offers traditional ground coffee as well as single-serve K-Cups in both regular and decaf. And if you aren't a coffee person, Java Remix also offers CBD-infused teas and even beauty products like bath bombs and body scrubs. As an added benefit right now for our Prove Me Wrong listeners, if you go online, that's javaremix.com, and enter the promo code Prove Me Wrong, you'll receive an extra 20% discount off your entire shopping experience. Java Remix also offers free shipping on all orders over $40. You literally have no reason not to give it a try. Once again, that's javaremix.com, promo code Prove Me Wrong. The Prove Me Wrong podcast is brought to you tonight by ZendoZone citronella burners by J.T. Eaton. They're shaped like fearless bug-repellent tiki gods, so let Surf and Stan, Hawaiian Howie, and Luau Lily bring the islands to your backyard with ZendoZone citronella burners. ZendoZones uses natural 3% citronella candles and incense cones. They're perfect for patios, decks, backyards, campsites, poolside, and more. You can enjoy the outdoors again. They're available on Amazon.com and also at select Ace Hardware stores, so go online and collect them all today. So once again, for my guest, Doug Reynolds, lowcarbusa.org. I am Pete Lieb. This is the Prove Me Wrong podcast, and we hope to see you again soon.